This podcast is brought to you by the Ethical Society of St. Louis, Being Human Together. The following recording is of a platform address presented to the Ethical Society of St. Louis by our leader, Dr. James Croft. Entitled The Pandemic Pause, Using the COVID Crisis to Get Clarity, it was recorded live on 30 May 2021. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, this presentation was given live over Zoom. If you would like to watch these platforms live, Sundays at 11 a.m. Central Time, go to our website, ethicalstl.org, for instructions.
Since the person giving the platform address today is me, I guess I don't need to give myself an introduction, but just in case you missed it at the beginning, I'm James Croft. I'm the leader of the Ethical Society of St. Louis. And today I'm going to be talking about the pandemic pause, or how we can use the COVID crisis to get clarity about what's really important in our lives. This has been the year of the pandemic pause, a year which saw the postponement of everything from the Olympics to the 2020 season at the Muni. For those of you from Riverdale, that is a big open-air theatre that does musicals all throughout the summer. Even the most important cultural celebration in the world had to be cancelled in 2020. Of course, I'm talking about the Eurovision Song Contest, a competition in which extremely unusual European pop groups plus Australia vie to become Europe's most ironically loved band of the year. I'm still grieving that lost Eurovision year. The pandemic pressed pause on all these things and many more besides. We pressed pause on many of our personal events too. Colton and I had to cancel our annual trip back to Europe to see my family. My sister had to move her wedding, and she still hasn't been able to reschedule it. How about you? What things did you have to press pause on this past year? What have you had to postpone or cancel? Perhaps type some of the things in the chat. I'd like to see if people have had to put things on hold for a little while. Bradley says travel. Nathan says vacations. Yep. I've cancelled and postponed a lot of planned vacations. What else have people had to pause on? Lance had to pause one of their children's confirmations at their mother's church. Heather, well, I guess it's Sean saying this because you became an uncle, right? Sean could not meet his newborn nephew, which is a big deal. Summer family reunion, teaching in person, birthday celebrations, family visits, granddaughters' weddings. And John or Brenda, I'm afraid I don't know which one, but one of you said my late father's memorial service, which is incredibly painful. And I'm sorry, all I can say is it's awful. It's awful that so many of us had to postpone so many things. You have a right to feel frustrated and sad. And it's not just the big things this pandemic has affected. Perhaps the most lasting effects of this past year will be felt in how it disrupted our everyday lives, the sorts of things Christian talked about in his opening words. I remember back when I first realized that the Ethical Society would be closed for a long time and that my life would have to change dramatically for a while. I tried to anticipate the many ways which the pandemic would affect me and my husband in our everyday life. Somehow I knew that I would be able to figure out the work stuff. I knew that this community would pull together and that we would be okay. But what I didn't have a sense for was how my everyday life would change. I remember rushing to the grocery store to stock up on all sorts of things, most of which it turned out we didn't need. Did any of you do that as well? Tons of toilet paper, canned goods. We still have unopened soup cans from March last year. We bought so many. As I entered into the grocery store back then, I remember this sense of panic and dread, this feeling that we were venturing into the unknown, wading into an uncertain future, and that we wouldn't like what we found there. It felt a bit like stepping into a zombie apocalypse movie, everyone staying as far away from each other as possible, masks on our faces. It was strange and scary. The pandemic pause has profoundly changed most of our lives. If I'm honest, I haven't much enjoyed the past 14 months. I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people. I derive a lot of energy from social interaction, which is one of the reasons I love my work so much. For many people, standing up on stage and giving a speech for tons of people would be their worst nightmare. And the socializing and small talk afterward would be even worse. My husband, Colton, is a little bit like that. He enjoys his solitude and his space, but not me. For me, being around other people amps me up. I just love seeing people's faces and getting enthusiastic about things with other people, seeing their excitement. And it gets better for me in groups. I sometimes feel quite awkward when I'm with someone one-on-one, but in a large group, I feel comfortable. I guess I feed off social interaction. It fills me up and it makes me happy. So more than a year of effective isolation with none of the bustle of group activity to look forward to has drained my batteries. Worse still is what the pandemic has done to my routines. Now, I'm not very good at sticking to routines anyway. Are any of you like that? I hope so. I often get the feeling that a lot of ethical society members are really put together and are pretty good with routines. But me, I'm impulsive. I like to be able to respond quickly to things that happen in the community, and I enjoy a certain flexibility, and if I'm honest, even a bit of chaos in my life. So my days and weeks don't have much of a fixed structure anyway. I don't get to sleep at the same time every night. How would I finish reading that book or article that's captured my attention? And I certainly don't wake up at the same time every morning. But pre-pandemic, at least I had some routines to anchor me. I spent at least 3 days a week at the Ethical Society. I came in every Sunday for platforms. I had regular meetings around town. I was forced to get up and out of the house. And when I arrived, there were people waiting for me. Wonderful, beautiful people. I had a gym to go to and lunch dates and press conferences and rallies and protests and. But pandemic time, not so much. All of that was gone. All of my meetings on Zoom, so I didn't even need to get fully dressed if I didn't want to. I have done a lot of meetings with a nice button-up shirt on top and comfy sweatpants on bottom, and I know some of you did too. Don't lie, I know you did. All my work from home, so no need to keep to a regular schedule. The pandemic pause in one fell swoop eliminated all the routines I did have, and in the process made life so much more difficult. My work expanded to fill every available moment, with no delineation between work time and time off. Since there was nothing to do, there was no need to take days off anyway, and nowhere to go if I did. So every day became sort of the same. The days started to blur together to the point when, apart from Sundays, it didn't really matter much what day it was. And honestly, the loss of these routines was really difficult. In fact, I didn't realize how much the loss of the structure of my everyday was affecting me until my husband sat me down and told me, you need more structure in your life. You're working all the time. You never turn off. You aren't exercising or sleeping well. It was a tough conversation, but a necessary one. The pandemic pause had pulled down the scaffolding of my life, and I was suffering for it. Given how profoundly I have hated this pandemic pause then, how could I possibly suggest this morning that something good might come out of it? Because for all the disruption it caused, sometimes we need to be shaken out of our routines in order to reevaluate our lives. Often, the scaffolding of our life provides a useful way to keep ourselves in check. It can motivate us, push us, keep us sane and healthy. But it can also limit us. Not every habit is healthy. Not every form of structure is positive. Sometimes we fall into ruts which keep us going down paths which are no longer fruitful for us. The pandemic pause, for all its absolutely undeniable awfulness in many respects, is also an opportunity to reevaluate how we live, to get clarity about what's really important to us. Perhaps an opportunity the likes of which we will never experience again. For instance, I love to dine at restaurants, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing so again. But being forced to stay home for almost a year and eat there made me appreciate how much I love cooking. It's a simple thing, and I could have cooked much more before the pandemic, but I didn't. The convenience of having someone else cook for me was just too great a lure. But once that option was removed, I was forced to cook more for myself, and I was reminded by how much I enjoyed it, how it calms me down, how it gives me an opportunity to clear my mind, how it reminds me of my father and all the dishes he used to cook. I love cooking, and the pandemic pause helped me remember that. It's also reignited my passion for city walks. Before I moved to St. Louis, I walked all the time. I didn't learn to drive until a couple of years after I moved to the city, because in London and Boston, where I used to live, there really was no need to drive. But in St. Louis, it soon became clear that to attend all the different events I was going to all around the city, I would have to learn to drive. So I did. At the age of 35, I was absolutely terrified. And once I did, my walking dropped off dramatically. Instead of my usual route to work, walk to the Central West End Metro, take the metro to Richmond Heights, and then walk to the Society, I started to drive. And while that shaved a lot of time off my commute, it also disconnected me from my community and discouraged me from walking at other times. Slowly, I replaced almost all my long walks with car rides, and I hardly noticed that it happened. During the pandemic, though, there's been basically nowhere I have needed to drive to. So in an effort to stay a bit active, I took up walking again, and I love it. I love wandering the streets of the city, music or a podcast in my ear, seeing the sights and nodding to the people as I pass by. I do it in a very sort of Victorian way, a very, very gentlemanly nod. I like to really exaggerate it, especially with the masks, because they have to know, that you've acknowledged them and you're graciously saying hello. The pandemic pause has caused me to reevaluate many of my routines and rediscover things I had enjoyed but had let lapse. On a broader level, I've used some of the time I've had during the pandemic to think more deeply about what I want from life. The pandemic has reminded me that life is short, that we don't have total control over the conditions in which we live, that we cannot predict the future and do not know how long we have or in what circumstances we will be living. This reminder has had the effect for me of clarifying my values and priorities. There is something about being confronted with the fragility of life and of our whole society which puts things in perspective. It has, in a sense, deepened my humanistic appreciation of the preciousness of our lives and of our time. It may seem odd that a confrontation with our fragility and a reminder of our powerlessness to control anything beyond our own choices and actions should inspire such reflection. But perhaps it is precisely the fragility of our lives and of our projects which makes them precious and gives them meaning. The philosopher Martin Hägglund, who wrote this book, This Life, which is perhaps the most wonderful book of secular philosophy I have ever read, makes that exact case. Through hundreds of pages of exquisitely argued prose, he suggests that any value in our lives comes from our fragility and our limitations. It is because we are subject to loss, including the loss of our loved ones and ultimately our own lives, that our time is precious. If we had infinite time, it would not matter what we did with it. It's because we are limited in our powers and cannot do everything we wish to do that our attention and effort is precious. If we had infinite power and could do whatever we wanted, there would be no significance in what we chose to do because we would never be giving anything else up. In the face of something like the pandemic pause, I find Hägglund's arguments especially profound. The pandemic has revealed just how fragile our way of life really is, how subject to the whims of nature we are, that we are not captains of spaceship Earth, but merely some of its passengers. Perhaps to some, this would give reason to despair, but I am minded to take Hägglund's approach and see in the pandemic a cause to renew my commitment to what he calls secular faith. As he puts it, we must acknowledge the utter fragility of what holds our lives together, our institutions, our shared labor, our love, our mourning, and yet keep faith with what offers no final guarantee. This is the double movement of secular faith. Acknowledge the fragility of everything we hold dear, and yet commit ourselves to the ability of human beings to make meaning and purpose, even though there is no guarantee we will exceed. In that spirit, perhaps, we can look at the pandemic pause as an opportunity to clarify our values and recommit to the things that are most important to us. Perhaps there are things that this moment of retreat has helped you clarify, things that it's encouraged you to recommit to. And if there are things, just share them in the chat. Say things you've rediscovered that you love, things that had dropped away, things that you are realizing now are more important than you thought they were. It would be nice to see things that people have reconnected with, even though we've lost so much. Louise says, art and cuddles with my cat. I know how valuable my puppy has been to me this year. Just spending time on the sofa with my puppy has been just, so thankful. Heather/Sean says, reading, fashion history, and sewing. it's really nice to see that people have found opportunities to reconnect with things that are important to them. And just feel free as they come to you, to add them in the chat, and we'll see what people come up with. Perhaps, too, we'll be able to think about how to live differently on a global scale. The other day, Colton and I watched the documentary The Year the Earth Changed. And in fact, I got the inspiration for my title from that documentary. It's really amazing. I'm going to play you the trailer. It is just such a wonderful documentary. I can't recommend it enough. Here's the trailer for that documentary.
March 2020. A deadly virus sweeps around the world. Overnight, our lives are put on pause.
Today, the WHO declared a pandemic,
issuing a stay home, stay safe order,
directing all of our residents to quite simply stay at home.
But as we stop, remarkable things start to change in the natural world.
With the clear skies, for the first time in a lifetime, we can see the Himalayas.
With beaches closed to humans, these animals were nesting at a more successful rate than we've ever seen.
One vocalizing and then the other. I'd never heard that before.
From the start of lockdown, across 5 continents, we have recorded a global experiment of epic proportions that has shown us, if we choose, we can transform the health of the planet for all.
Oof. I was suddenly hit by the enormity of what we've all been through in the past year. It's really a lot, isn't it? That documentary, narrated, of course, by David Attenborough, the most British person in existence, examines the many ways in which the cessation of much human activity over the past year has made space for the resumption of activity by other life on Earth. It tells stories of a record-breaking breeding season for penguins, whales communicating with their young in ways we've never heard, the decrease in boat traffic and their polluting noise, enabling them to literally sing new songs, turtles reclaiming beaches from sunbathers, laying their eggs without human disturbance, which causes them to lose so many of their young. The stunning images in the documentary of air pollution dropping dramatically as we all left our cars in the garage and our planes in their hangars for a while, it's almost biblical, miraculous. It took just days for pollution levels to drop precipitously and for people to see things they had never seen because the pollution was so heavy. As David Attenborough puts it, the moment we paused, the Earth was able to breathe again. I love what Brenda says in the chat there. In a sense, nature had been on lockdown all this time, and putting us into lockdown kind of released a lot of nature to do what it otherwise would do. It's a beautiful thought. The pandemic, in other words, has acted as what researchers call a natural experiment, a naturally occurring phenomenon which radically alters the conditions in a particular place and time, so we can perform comparisons between what we see there and at other times. And as the results of the past year's experiment come in, the data are incredibly clear. We human beings, with our everyday routines, have a profound impact on the natural world, an impact beyond what we even knew before. The pandemic pause then has clarified our relationship with all the life on Earth. I think this is an especially poignant reminder for humanists. We understand that we are just one animal among many, and that we have responsibilities to all others. We know that we are literally related to all other life, that the animal kingdom is our family and our ancestry. The pandemic pause and its effects on the natural world is a profound reminder of the truth of one of our Sikh core values, which you heard Helen read so perfectly earlier. We are part of this earth. We cherish it and all the life upon it. Yet we don't always. Perhaps we rarely do. The truth is, we have created a way of life for ourselves which is deeply damaging to much of the other life on Earth. And the pandemic has given us the most vivid possible reminder of that fact. Attenborough asks towards the end of the documentary, what inspiration can we take from this moment to find better ways to coexist with nature? To put the question more philosophically, here is Martin Hagland again, writing about what our response to the pandemic might be in The New Statesman. For human beings, the question of how we should lead our lives is always at issue, even if we try to forget that fact. We can discover the ideal conditions for other species by studying their natural way of life. But we cannot discover the best way for us to live simply by studying our present or past societies. We are the only animals among the species known to us who do not have a given place in nature. We have to make a home for ourselves. By the same token, we are liable to create conditions that are inimical to our own flourishing. Thus, when we are hit with a pandemic, we cannot treat it merely as a natural, unfortunate event that happens to befall our form of life. Like all animals, we can be infected for contingent reasons, but unlike other animals, we are answerable for the social causes and consequences. A pandemic inevitably raises the question of who we are as a species and how we organize our societies. The question of who we are as a species and how we organize our societies. The pandemic pause has dramatically clarified the importance of that question, and I can't think of things more worthy to consider than that. Speaking of the organization of our societies, the Ethical Society of St. Louis is now actively preparing to reopen. Just as the pandemic pause might have offered an opportunity for individuals to reevaluate, it has enabled the Ethical Society to do so too. We aren't quite ready to share all of our reopening plans. We have a team of members and staff actively reviewing and discussing options, considering factors like safety, accessibility, equity, and our need for community. But I can say a little about the goals I hope to set for the community when we do come back together. We are, of course, when we rejoin each other in person, going to have a changed platform time, moving from 11 to 10 a.m. for the coming program year to see how that works. And with that, we'll have new Sunday morning programs. And if you have an idea for programs you'd like to host on Sunday mornings after platform, then please send me an email and we'd like to facilitate those. We're going to be set up in the building for hybrid programming, so you'll be able to join our Zoom programs like this one online in a Zoom room hosted so that you can chat and hang out with other people just like now. It's just that instead of seeing the music in one window and me speaking in another window, you'll have a live feed of what's going on in the auditorium. There will be a new Sikh curriculum based on a monthly examination of each of the SEEK core values, so that the program year has more of a rationale to it and unfolds as we go through the year, so people will know exactly what core value we're studying each and every month in SEEK. And I want to bring a special focus on equity and accessibility to our programming this year, because one of the things that's been made clear by the pandemic pause are questions about who has access to what programming and who is currently being excluded. Some of those elements are already in place with the new gender-neutral bathroom, changes to our seating in the auditorium to allow more people with different sorts of mobility challenges to be able to see the platform from different spaces in the room. And we'll also be bringing in an outside equity consultant to evaluate our programming and ask what we can do more to be welcoming of every person. I know that as we return to in-person gatherings, some of you are going to feel jubilant, while some will feel nervous. It's our goal to reopen slowly, safely, and in accordance with all the medical evidence. But I also want to make the most of this forced hiatus in our gatherings, using it to gain clarity around what's really important to us as a community. And to that end, I'm inviting you to send in thoughts or suggestions about where you think we should go from here, what you think we should do. I want your program suggestions, your suggestions for changes, ideas about what we can do differently. If we're going to extract value from this challenging year, then we'll have to think clearly about why this community exists, what we hope to achieve, and who we want to be for each other. Please send your suggestions to jcroft@ethicalstl.org. And if we all work together, I'm sure we can use the pandemic pause to gain clarity. Thank you.
You have been listening to a platform address presented to the Ethical Society of St. Louis by our leader, Dr. James Croft, on 30 May 2021. To hear other platform addresses, to learn more about our society, the ethical culture movement, or to donate to support our society, please visit our website at ethicalstl.org. Until next time, thank you for listening.